Boop. Echo. And Echo's gone. Okay, so
it was a good sound effect.
Yeah, and great start, I think, too. So we are live once again from Brian's basement, where I still don't have a backdrop. Well, background. I have a backdrop. I have nothing interesting to look at. You're just stuck with our two ugly mugs. But we're back again to answer your questions. We got our Aquatics Enthusiast and video host, Thomas. How you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
How are you, Brian?
I'm a little peeved.
Excellent. Why?
You forgot you were supposed to bring homemade donuts for us to snack on while we were hanging out here, and
I fumbled.
You fumbled.
On my way out the door, I messed up and I forgot. I'm an anxious person when I'm leaving to go somewhere, and I'm very worried about showing up on time, and therefore I'm very punctual. But what I often do, because I'm so worried about getting out the door, is leave things behind. So unless they're glued to me, they don't end up coming a lot of the time. But the good news is I have tons of homemade donuts that we made this morning, and they're delicious, and I will bring them next time.
I'm just going to have to drive to your house. Donuts are my kryptonite. I can't resist them, and I've been trying to eat less / healthier, and when you said you were bringing them, I got excited, and now I'm all let down and sad.
To put that in perspective, Brian once told me when he was going to the gym, hardcore and stuff, which he still does, that he wasn't eating junk food anymore, but I rolled through this donut joint and got a maple bacon donut, and it was a donut with maple glaze and bacon on top of it, and then something else. Yes. Maple syrup or something. Yeah. It was insanely good, and I couldn't eat the whole thing, so I just kept giving half to Brian, and he couldn't say no. Right
now, I wish we had that effect where you like go to the dreams, and I'm like thinking about the donut, because that's where I'm at right now. Anyway, all that said, we're happy to be here nonetheless, with donuts or without donuts. So I guess we'll get right.
You guys are our donuts.
You guys are our donuts today, which is just as good. Ready to get to the questions?
Yes.
Okay. Number 1, please tell me how to clean my aquarium gravel before setting up the tank.
Just rinse it in tap water, warm tap water. Just rinse it off. That's all you got to do. Just rinse it, dump it in the tank.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
How often can you feed your anemones with brine shrimp?
You can feed an anemone. I usually go about twice a week when I'm feeding anemones. Some people will do it more often, but usually you'll feed your anemone. They'll take in the food, and you'll actually see when they expel that waste. Once they've expelled it, they can technically take more food. So I usually only go twice a week. I'm not, in some kind of anemone race where I want them to blow up extremely fast. And I'm talking specifically about photosynthetic anemones, because if they are anemones that only eat food, then you may want to feed them more often or as often as they're willing to eat, because that's the only nutrients they're getting. But otherwise, I think twice a week's a good number, and that's it.
Sweet. Can you suggest some colorful community fish, some community freshwater fish, please?
Colorful community freshwater fish. There's all kinds. I'm a big fan of rainbows. Thread fin rainbows are really cool if you want to get down to tiny stuff. Killifish are incredible. However, they don't usually live very long. There are some species that get bigger and live a bit longer, like gold killies. I think they're called gold killies. They're basically yellow, and they're awesome. I'm also a big fan of ram cichlids, which like dwarf blue rams are awesome. They can mix into communities pretty easily. Pick any tetra. They're all really colorful. They're pretty good community fish. Rasboras are great community fish. Depending on what other fish are in the tank, I could also push you towards barbs, although they tend to get a little bit more aggressive. So I only usually do a barb tank if I'm going to be keeping predominantly barbs or other fish that can kind of hold their own against barbs, so like larger fish. Yeah.
Do you know how to successfully breed Dojo Loaches?
No, I've never done it.
Oh, okay. If anyone in the chat knows, Josh, we have Josh, by the way, I didn't mention this. We have Josh in the chat. He's here to answer any questions as well. If there's something that we can't get to or don't know, he's there to help you. In any case, it's always worth mentioning if you have a question that we can't answer, don't have time to get to, you can email support@bigalspets.com, and they will help answer your question.
What I can say is Dojo Loaches, also known as weather loaches, are really cool, and they actually get a lot bigger than you might think. I think the largest ones I've seen were the better part of, 10 inches. They were huge. They were huge weather loaches, and they were awesome. And they'll fly around the tank when their pressure system's changing. So when the weather in your area changes, they tend to get all uppity and start flying all around the aquarium. So it's really important that you have a nice tight-fitting lid so that they can't jump out.
Good tip. Starting my first reef aquarium. Any suggestions?
Yeah, go slow. That is like the number one reef aquarium suggestion. I've got a whole bunch of suggestions, but I'll try to drill them down to the basics. For reef aquariums, I really like starting with either dry rock or with man-made rock like Carib Sea Life Rock, because it completely avoids getting any pests, whether it's pest algae or hitchhikers that you don't want, like mantis shrimp, or any kind of parasite, any kind of detrimental critter that might show up, pest anemones like Aptasia, all that. You avoid all of that garbage by starting the tank with base rock, essentially. So I always like to start that way, because the last thing you want to do is introduce nasties into the tank that could mess with your reef, because we put a lot of effort into keeping coral and growing that stuff. It doesn't grow super fast, so the last thing you want to do is mess that up. Another thing is always dip your corals, no matter where they're coming from, even if it's from a friend's tank. So just dip everything. Again, you want to try to keep your reef free of pests, and that's the best way to do it, is just to be super diligent. If you can even set up a quarantine tank for your corals, or a separate system to get corals before they go into your main display, that's the best way to do it, so you can monitor them for upwards of 4 weeks before they even go into your main display. But yeah, those are my two hottest tips, I guess, for reef. I guess 3 if we're counting go slow. And when I say go slow, I mean, give it time to cycle. Give some space between adding corals to the tank. Just take your time, make sure everything's going well, test, watch things, get involved.
Cool. You mentioned coral dip, so
Yes.
Just for everyone, for your edification, I have dropped the link to our how to use a coral dip video in the chat. I believe Chi, did you do that one, or did Chi do that one? I think our good man Chi might have done that video.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
I may have done it.
Either way, it's in the chat section. Check it out if you don't know how to use a coral dip. It's a really helpful video for you, so you can follow this guy's tips without trouble. Next up, my albino bristlenose plex had a ton of babies.
Yep.
They're in a community 75-gallon tank. I do have extra tanks laying around, or do I leave them in?
You can do either. I'll often separate babies from the main system, just so I can get a really good handle on growing them out, because a competition for food in the tank is going to be very, very high, and babies aren't always super diligent at getting to the food. So if you put them in a separate system where it's just other babies, you can target feed them a lot easier and monitor them a lot easier. And I also find in general that pleco babies tend to stay out of sight a lot of the time, and it's hard to keep track of them. So I would personally put them in their own system and grow them out there, and they are a hot commodity, so I'm sure you will have no problem unloading them on other friendly aquarists, even for a price.
Cool.
Congratulations.
How long is an Oscar safe in a store bag?
Most fish are going to be safe in a store bag for the better part of an hour. That really depends on a lot of factors, though. The temperature of the bag as it goes through transport. Like if the temperature is changing dramatically, like your car's freezing cold when you get into it, and the bag is not insulated in any way, shape, or form, that's going to reduce the amount of time this Oscar is going to be safe in the bag. The size of the Oscar versus the amount of water in the bag and the size of the bag is going to change that. Whether or not they put oxygen into the bag or just atmospheric air when they're closing the bag up, that's going to change that. So honestly, it really depends. But if we're talking a small Oscar, maybe a couple inches in a, large-ish sized bag, maybe a bag that's tied up is going to be about 12 inches with maybe a 6 to 8 inch diameter and at least 4 inches of water in the bottom, 5 inches of water, you're probably going to be safe for up to an hour as long as the temperature doesn't change. But there's a lot of factors.
What do you guys think is the best way to make sure you don't get BBA in a freshwater tank?
BBA. Something algae. Algae. Baby ba. BBA? I don't know. What is BBA?
Get back to us and he'll
Yes,
get back to you.
Don't abbreviate things, because not everything is called the same thing or abbreviated the same way depending on where you are and where you live. So, yes, try to avoid abbreviations when asking me questions, just so I know very specifically.
Blackbeard algae.
Haha! Blackbeard algae. how to avoid it or how to treat it. Avoid it. Treat plants that you put in the tank before they actually go in. So there's different ways to do that. Plant dips are often very, very weak bleach solutions. You can also do plant dips using, and I highly recommend you actually go look up formulas. There's tons of formulas on forums you can look up for dipping plants before you put them into a system. I often also, to kill algae, will use things like peroxide. So peroxide dips or spraying peroxide on leaves can work. It depends on the plant. Some plants are very sensitive to that. So again, make sure you do a little bit of research. And you can also do a double dose, like put them in a quarantine system and do a double dose of Seachem Flourish Excel. Again, there's lots of forums that have information on how to do that safely. Obviously, if you ask Seachem, they'll probably tell you that you shouldn't do it just for their own safety's sake, but lots of people have used a double dose of Flourish Excel as a way of combating algae, especially things like blackbeard algae. It's worked very well for me in the past. But yes, you should treat the plants and comb over anything you add to the tank before you add it, and that'll help keep things that you don't want out of the system, like algae and snail eggs and other nasties.
Can cut PVC pipe be used as biomedia?
I'm going to say I wouldn't bother. Now, PVC is not very porous at all, and the surface area of a cut piece of PVC is going to be vastly less than even just a bioball. The whole idea with biological media is that you're trying to take a specific volume, so the volume of your canister filter, let's say, and add a component to that for bacteria to land on, but that component has to have as much surface area possible for the volume of that filter, right? Because the whole idea is to jam as much bacteria as you can into that filter. So if you can imagine a bioball has all those little spikes on it, the outside of each spike is surface area. So they're basically just designed for that sphere to have as much surface area as possible. Porous medias like Eheim Substrat Pro, for instance, those tiny little Cocoa Puff looking balls have an insane amount of surface area because of the porous structure of the ball. So that has even more surface area than most bioballs will. And essentially you want to try to use something that's going to increase that surface area. So cut PVC pipe is really not going to do that very well at all. So I wouldn't recommend it. There's a ton of different things you could use. Tons of different medias. You can even use lava rock would be a way better choice than cut pieces of PVC. But I like the fact that you're trying to go DIY. That's really smart. Saving money where you can is a great way to enjoy your hobby more, because then you can put money that you want to allocate to things that make more of a visual difference to your tank, like livestock or plants or ornaments or lighting, etc. You can put more money there by saving some money in other areas. The one thing I will say is do your very best not to skimp out on your filtration. It is the backbone of your system. So the biological filtration especially, get something that's going to work really well. Don't just skimp out because you're trying to save some money. That's the worst place to save money, in my opinion, on your aquarium is on your biomedia. Worst place.
Good tip.
Yeah.
Guys, remember, if you can, like us, like the stream. It'll help us a lot. So if you're here watching, you're liking what we're doing, make sure to hit that like button. Next up, is it okay to have a lidless tank? I want my LED to reach the bottom of the tank easier, and it's a pain to take it on and off and clean it if I keep the water level 2 inches below the rim.
It is absolutely okay to run a lidless tank. There are certain drawbacks and things you have to consider when you're running a lidless tank, like do not put species of fish that are known to jump into that tank. They will jump. Even if you drop the water level 2 inches, they will jump out of that tank. They will find a way to carpet surf their way into wherever fishes go when they pass. The other thing you want to consider is that without a lid, you're going to get a lot more evaporation. So that has a couple of issues. One, you're going to top off the tank more often. So you may want to get an auto top off. It'll just make life a little bit easier for you and also prevent some of that lime scale buildup you're going to get, or like those water marks around the top of the tank where it keeps evaporating and coming back up. The other thing is if you are in a room, the tank's fairly large and the room's fairly small, the humidity in the room's going to go up dramatically. So that can end up having issues with like condensation on windows. So some people, depending on how well ventilated the room is, etc., may end up having issues with moisture content in that room, which can cause damage to the room itself. Not nearly as common, but it can happen. So I am just throwing that out there
Something
too.
to look out for.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, this next question, it's not something you can really answer with any certainty because we don't know the parameters and context. Someone asked, my plants are turning brown. What is the reason? I will start off by saying, for questions like this where we can't see your plants and don't have a lot of context, email us at support@bigowlspets.com with photos, any kind of details you have about your tank, and they'll be able to help you much more specifically and effectively than we can. But for the purposes of this chat, what are some possibilities that this guy's plants are turning brown?
There's a bunch of possibilities, and it really depends on where the plant is turning brown, where on the leaf it's happening, if it's starting in the middle and going outwards, starting at the edges coming in, if it's spotting, if the whole plant is sort of dying at once, turning brown. There's too many variables, but a lot of the time, leaf die-off has to do with a lack of a specific nutrient, and that's kind of why you need to know where it's turning brown, how fast it's turning brown, if there's a pattern to it turning brown, like just the edges, or if it's spotting, if the whole plant's turning, like all of these things will tell you what essentially is failing in that plant, what element you're missing.
You got to be a plant detective and look at the clues.
Yeah, so it's a lot more than just turning brown. There is so much more going on than just the color. How it happens, where it happens, when it happens, if it's all happening at once, if it's happening in individual leaves, will all dictate what the problem is. So yeah, reach out to our support team, send pictures big time, and tell them everything about your system, what you're adding, what you're not adding, what you're testing for, what you're not testing for, all of it.
Yep. What's the best way to get algae off your artificial plants?
Honestly, I usually get a weak bleach solution in a bucket. Just make sure it's pure bleach. There's no other perfumes or anything added to it. Just chlorine bleach, and let them soak in there for upwards of a couple hours. Just check back on them. That either will dissolve the algae or can make it a lot easier to just rub it off with your fingers or a sponge or something like that. But yeah. And again, if you check online, you'll find lots of recipes for what dilution you should use. I usually put a cap of bleach per 5-gallon bucket of water, and that usually does it for me. If you got a ton of algae on there, you might need a little bit more, but it's easier to start off with less than it is to just put a ton of bleach in there, because you can actually discolor the plastic of the plants if you overdo it. So you got to be careful.
Cool. I have a bit of sunlight going into my tank. I don't have a choice. I can't move it, which causes quick algae growth. Will algae treatment help this, or will it be useless because of the sunlight that's always there?
If you put an actual algicide into the tank, it will help, but it'll always be temporary. Because as soon as that algicide stops working, it's been metabolized by the system or loses its chemical integrity, you're just going to get algae back. Your best bet is to put blinds or a covering or something on the window so that you can control the amount of light that's going to the tank. If that is actually impossible, you can, this sounds silly, but you can actually cover the tank until the time of day where the sun is no longer directly on the tank, and then take it off. You can also keep the aquarium light off during the hours that the tank is receiving natural sunlight, which will also help reduce it.
Practical tips. Any live plants that grow to be 6 inches max?
6 inches tall maximum? There are. You'll find that some small crypts will top out somewhere around 6 inches. Chain swords there's some species of like dwarf chainsword that might stop around 6 inches. Anubias nana I've never seen grow taller than 6 inches. Not to say that it can't, I've just never seen it happen. A lot of Bucephalandra species will stop before 6 inches. So all kinds of stuff. And the nice thing is you can just trim plants. So for instance, there's a plant that I'm going to be using in the low-tech planted tank that all the plants, just so you guys know, because I know everybody always, I'll mention this, everybody always comments about how slow that series is coming out. So the aquascape video is already shot. You guys are going to see that really soon. I've actually already also ordered all the plants I intend to use for that build. And my point was, one of the plants that I'm going to be using gets over 6 inches, but I'm going to use it kind of to carpet the tank because it's a low-tech plant. And you can do it. It just requires that you trim the plant often. So what I will gain from that plant is a nice carpet at the expense of a little bit more maintenance. So you can also use other plants that will grow taller, stem plants. Certain types of stem plants work really well for this, and just chop it down. Just keep it trimmed nice and short. All those really nice tanks you see with like dwarf baby tears and hair grass carpets and all that stuff, they're being trimmed pretty regularly. They don't just stay that way. They grow. So just consider that you can always groom plants to kind of do more what you'd like. You don't always have to just get a plant that's going to stop at 6 inches.
Cool. Next up, I'm setting up my first saltwater tank. Is this stock okay for a 17-gallon? 2 Ocellaris clownfish, 1 yellow clown goby or yellow watchman goby, 4 to 5 Necerius snails, and a blue tuxedo urchin.
Yes, the only one on there that kind of catches my attention really is the tuxedo urchin. Because although they're a small urchin, they do get pretty big still, and you will find that in a 17-gallon, they make the rounds quick, and they will pick up everything in the tank that you try to... If you don't glue it down, it'll end up on top of them. It's annoying. It's very annoying. I usually actually push people away from urchins unless you've got a bigger system, because urchins will often also, while they're grazing on algae and moving everything in the tank all around, they'll also chew on coralline algae, which can make that nice growth, purple coverage of coralline on the rock take a lot longer to kind of take hold in the aquarium, because the urchin is constantly mowing it off. So I would probably drop the urchin, and I would say instead of 4 to 5 Necerius is actually a lot. Necerius are zombie snails. You really only need 2 for that system, and I would trade the other snails for Trochus. Banded Trochus snails they're awesome. As far as algae eaters go, they're probably my favorite snail. They can self-right. So that means if they fall over, they will pick themselves back up and flip over. Not all snails can do that. Too. Yeah, tortoises have a hard time with that. So do most snails. So they can right themselves, and even kind of more cool is that they often will breed in captivity. So where we usually lose snails to lack of food and stuff, or just over time them getting picked on by hermit crabs if you end up putting those in there. Necerius Trochus snails will actually reproduce, and then you'll end up with more snails in the system that you can either take back to a store or trade to other aquarists and stuff like that. So, but yeah.
100-gallon freshwater tank. Your opinion on the best way to filter?
100-gallon freshwater tank. Best way. I'm a big fan of some systems. Big fan. But 100-gallon, like you could easily do a sump system for a freshwater tank on 100-gallon. It would be awesome. But then you need a tank that's drilled, or to buy, a hang-on overflow system, which has its own issues. So if your tank's not already drilled, I would say an FX4 would be an excellent filter for a 100-gallon tank. If you want, you could even go up to an FX6, although that'll be a ton of flow. So I'm gonna stick with FX4. Fluval FX4 canister would be a pretty rockin'. That or an Eheim 2070, 20, 78, 76. I'm going to be honest. I don't even remember what numbers we're on with Eheim now. Pro 4, the largest of the Pro 4 series would be a great option as well. Or you could do the big Pro 3 series like a 2078, but you don't have to do that. I think the Pro 4 series, the largest of the Pro 4, is going to do a fantastic job on a 100-gallon as well.
Cool. Next up, and whether or not you have the answer to this, I'm not sure, but Josh, hopefully in the comments, I'm not sure, I don't see you answering it, but hey, maybe you did. As my future planted tank awaits your next episodes, it seems to have contracted white worms. How do I safely get rid of them without hurting the fish?
If we're talking about the white worms that just show up in the gravel, I would wonder. I've honestly not had to combat white worms myself, so this is a lot of me supposing, but I would suppose that bottom feeding fish would probably get rid of them. But I don't quote me on that. I think we need to do a bit of research on that one. I usually rely mostly on my firsthand experiences to help people get through ailments. Since I have not fought white worms yet, that makes it more difficult for me. So Josh, if you know the answer, throw that in there. Otherwise, reach out to our support team and they'll find out. And I should start taking notes. I should bring a notepad so I can research things.
So John, this is like carve it in the table. So it's here for next time and we can quickly
Just
Google.
burn it in.
Yeah. My wife would love that.
Yeah.
Next up, how often should you feed baby guppies and platies?
Babies? I like to feed them a few times a day. Again, very small amounts. Make sure they eat kind of everything you put in before you put in more. I find baby fish do better when they're eating multiple times a day in small amounts than if you were to just feed them once and then walk away. The key thing is, though, that if you are going to feed multiple times a day, that you test the water and make sure you're keeping up with water changes, because baby fish can be more sensitive to poor water quality than adult fish. So make sure you don't feed them to the point where your nitrates and stuff are rising through the roof and hurt their little fishy selves, bodies. But yeah, multiple times a day, small amounts, make sure they eat it all, and you will have great results. I hope.
Hi guys, I'm new to tanking. I have a 55, welcome by the way.
Yay! I love hearing that.
Yeah, I have a 55 gallon and I'm not sure to go for real or false plants. What's the easiest option? Thanks.
Easiest is fake plants all the way. Brian's going to throw our fake plant video into the chat. It was probably one of the first really popular videos we ever did. Was it the second video we ever shot?
It might have been within the first 3, I guess. And it was a pretty legit video, man. I really enjoyed it. And we've got a huge reaction to it because it helps so many people say, you know what, I think I'm just going to go with fake plants, because you show people how to do it to make it look natural.
Yeah, make it look
really
less
awesome,
all over the place. If you want just easy, honestly, just easy maintenance, very straightforward things to do, very easy regimen to follow, fake plants all the way. If you want to learn a whole bunch and turn it into more of a project and, kind of aim for that natural habitat look, real plants can be rewarding and fun and be good for the system, but there is a learning curve. People will often buy, live plants to start off with their aquarium and have them unfortunately not thrive, and it kind of sets them off of live plants after that. So if it interests you on a hobby level, I would say real plants are a lot of fun. If you want easy, you want fish to look at and enjoy, and you don't want any added maintenance and things to be very simple and straightforward, fake plants is definitely the way to go. 100%.
Cool. Are elegance corals... Oh, I put the video in the chat. Check it out. Are elegance corals good for beginners?
I'm going to say on the whole, I would call them an intermediate difficulty of coral. I wouldn't say they're easy for beginners, but I'm also not going to say they're expert level, because they're definitely not. They can be quite easy to keep. You just need to get the basics. Realistically, you need the basics of maintaining calcium, magnesium, and alkalinity in the aquarium, because they are a LPS coral, large polyp stony corals, so they have a very large skeleton that's made up of calcium carbonate, so they need that calcium and alkalinity in the water to stay stable for them to do very well. So they are an intermediate coral, I would say.
Love tanking.
Yay.
Him too. Upgraded 55 to a 95. Got about 60 fish in there now. A mix of mollies and guppies, dwarf gouramis. Am I pushing the bio load?
No, you're... If you have a good filter on that tank, 60 fish is a lot of fish for a 95. But it is not unmanageable. As long as you're testing the water, and they're all small fish, they're not going to feel super overcrowded in that space. They're not aggressive towards each other in any way, shape, or form. So I think you're in a pretty good area. Your fish are probably going to keep breeding, and you're probably going to keep having that number go up, and you will reach a saturation point. I've learned through the experience of somebody else in our office, the saturation point for a 10-gallon is 100 fish. Kevin, 100 guppies in a 10-gallon is too much.
That was crazy.
That was not... We're not proud sometimes.
No.
It was like a baby tank. The problem was he had a 90 and it was full of fish, and he was removing babies to separate them. It's just sometimes you end up with more babies than tanks to put them in. So you need to reach a point where you're giving fish away or taking them to a store or doing whatever you got to do.
Just got out of control.
Yeah, because you don't want to hit the saturation point. 60 fish on a 90 is not the saturation point, especially if they're 1 to 2 inch fish. Just be diligent with water changes, diligent with checking your water parameters, and you'll know when you see that tank and there's too many fish, it's going to be pretty evident. You won't be able to keep up with algae. You're not going to be able to keep up with your nitrate production unless you're doing water changes constantly. That's when you've got too many fish. 100%. It's well before you have ammonia problems. If you have nitrate issues, you've got too many fish. If you've got algae issues and it's not because of lighting, it's probably because of nitrates and you've probably got too many fish. But I think you're in a safe place right now. Just you're going to start hitting the line soon.
Be careful. And we are already at the halfway point.
Yay!
Which is crazy.
You know what that means?
You know what that means? It means it's time for our brand new segment. And cut! All right. Do you know how much that graphic cost us? Take a ballpark swing at it.
$10.
$3 million. $3 million.
Whoa!
Worth every penny. Well, now I feel foolish. I feel like I overspent. You said $10 and now $3 million. I'm going to have to get in touch with them for a refund.
Was it from Fiverr or did you make it?
I made it.
Oh!
I paid myself $3 million.
Imaginary dollars?
Yes, imaginary dollars. I'm now imaginarily rich. Okay, so anyway, it is time for our segment. What did Brian learn this week? I'm not a guy in the hobby. Not this fact this week doesn't actually have much to do with the hobby, funny enough. Just something really cool that I read that involves the ocean.
Oh, okay.
So I thought I'd go for it. So, cool. My fact this week that I learned. Did you know dolphins are helping us in the search for aliens?
What?
Now, before I go on, do you want to take any guesses at how dolphins are helping us in the search for aliens?
Our science we're using technology to mimic the sonar echolocation of dolphins in a way to reach deep probe into space.
You know what? You're on the right track. It has to do with language. So,
okay.
I'll start by saying that the planet that we're on is suspended in space. And because of that, we get all kinds of like transmissions, signals, radiation, x-rays, all kinds of stuff hits the Earth. And it's a certain group of scientists, it's their job to analyze all these signals and transmissions and determine what is random noise from the universe and what could be intelligent, intentional communication.
Nice.
So we've looked at human languages and said, okay, what does human language consist of that, could help us in analyzing possible alien languages? And we found a lot of cool stuff. That's fine. But scientists about 60 years ago kind of turned their attention away from the skies and away from humans and looked at other creatures on Earth that have sophisticated languages and communication. There's a few different species that are very good candidates, but dolphins, those lovely little mammals of the sea, are specifically intelligent, and their language is very complex. Not as complex as us, but very complex. So this, I kid you not, 60 years ago, a bunch of scientists, including Carl Sagan, started something that's called the Order of the Dolphin. It sounds like a nerd cult or something, but it was really cool. They started studying dolphin language. And what they found is that dolphin language has that, like, dolphins use syntax. They're able to describe abstract concepts like mood. Like they can tell each other they're in a bad mood, which is weird. Their age. They can talk like that. And so and what they were able to do is compare dolphinese to different human language.
So
like
there are people on this planet that speak dolphin, or at least can interpret dolphin?
Not quite. These are all sophisticated guesses. So here's the thing. We don't know what they're saying, but what they did is, actually, you know what? Just for everyone who doesn't know or can't remember what a dolphin sounds like, let me just quickly cue this up for you, and you can hear what a dolphin sounds like. Okay, so that's dolphin sounds. We all know it. We all love it. Those are dolphin sounds. So they measure like the clicks and whistles. They measure the spaces in between, and they're able to determine that dolphins. It gets pretty complex, but essentially in any human language, the first most commonly used word is used twice as much as the second most commonly used word, etc., etc. Right. Dolphins do the same thing. So we don't know what they're saying, but we know they're saying something important to each other using syntax and abstract ideas. So they're taking all that information they've learned over the last 60 years, pointing it up at the sky, using it to analyze signals coming in.
I think that makes sense because dolphins have a pretty good handle on long distance communication, which yes. I think makes a lot more sense if we're trying to analyze a message that would be carried to us via radio waves or whatever it is from space noise. Right. Because space noise is going to travel a lot further yes. than any kind of language that has a lot of complex pronouncing or enunciation or anything like that. If it's a simple signal, like Morse code or something, right. it would have a much better chance of reaching a far, far away planet of intelligent things made up of space dust. Absolutely. Which we are all made up of space dust.
Indeed. We're getting real deep.
I love this.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the cool thing I read about. I was just reading about dolphins. The thing that led me to that, and just a quick side fact about dolphins, I was actually reading about dolphins in captivity and at like SeaWorld and stuff. You know, I don't like those places. I don't go, but there was a really interesting thing where the trainers were using the dolphins to clean up trash out of the, like if people threw in like flyers or programs into the tank, they'd train the dolphins
to go get them.
To get it and like clean the tank. What one dolphin did, I don't know what was the dolphin's name, Kelly or something, it found one, took it to the bottom of the tank and like kind of wedged it in and would tear bits off and return it and get twice the treats.
Smart!
Yeah, it wouldn't just take one. It would say, okay, I can use this and get like 6 treats. So it did that. So that was kind of neat. And then I ended up reading...
Dolphin started his own business.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he went into business for himself and it made quite a killing. So... pretty interesting stuff about dolphins. The one about teaching us, helping us talk to aliens, I thought was kind of neat. So that's what I learned this week.
And honestly, Brian, I think this is my favorite new segment.
Awesome.
This is a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, next we'll go more into the fish and stuff next week, but this was just something I had to talk about because I thought it was kind of neat. Awesome. So we'll get back into the questions now that we're rolling. Everyone, don't forget to hit the like button if you are enjoying our live Q&As. It would help us a lot. Next question. Hi there. What should I do when I go on holiday for 5 days? I've had a neighbor look after them when I was away for 2 weeks, and they all died. I'm nervous now.
Okay, so you've got a couple of options. Number one, never trust your neighbors to have a good grasp of what they need to do for your aquarium, even feeding. The average person is going to feed the tank way too much and probably kill it. That's what happens very often. So you can either set up your own automatic feeder that runs on a timer, or it can be digitally set up. My favorite is the Eheim automatic feeder, and there's also a feeding station you can get to go with it, which is awesome. And that's one way to take care of that problem. Another way is through feeding blocks. You're only going away for 5 days, so you could get a 3-day or 4-day feeder and just drop that in. If your fish don't have food for a couple of days, that's not the end of the world. It takes much, much longer than that for most fish to starve. I say most because fish like Anthias, they've got a higher metabolism, so 2 days of no food is worse for them than it would be for something like a goldfish. The other option, and what I've done in the past, if you want to keep things super simple and low budget, is to get a pill container from the dollar store or the drugstore that has the days of the week on it. And, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and little compartments. And then you can portion off the food for the tank sitter. So you know exactly what the fish are getting each one of those days. You leave it with the tank and say, here you go. Go to the tank, open up Monday, dump in Monday. Open up Tuesday on Tuesday, dump in Tuesday. That way they're not overfeeding the system. That's your other option. Again, I prefer to have a digital device that I've set to feed the tank because I find them to be much more consistent than a neighbor, and I, for whatever reason, still don't trust them to even open up a pill bottle most of the time and get that part right. Not that people can't, it's just most time anybody's helping you out while you're away, they're doing so half-heartedly. And I don't fault humanity for this, but people all have busy lives and things to do, and sometimes they're just not paying attention. Yeah. So take out that human error and just do it with a device that you can rely on, and that's a lot easier. If you want your tank sitter to come in and just look at the tank, visually inspect it, or send you a picture so you can see what's going on with your aquarium, that is what you can do. Or you could get like a Wi-Fi camera set up and staring at the tank.
Yes.
And try to do it that way to babysit your own aquarium.
Just always be watching your phone.
That would be what I would be doing.
Yeah.
Sitting on the beach in the sun, staring at my aquarium, paying like $1 million a second in data so I can see my tank.
Meanwhile, your kids are just running off free somewhere. You have no idea where
drowning in the ocean. Go find a seahorse, honey!
Oh, my fish are doing great. Okay. Hey, guys, I'm wondering if there's an easy way to clean sand.
No. Like on the bottom of the tank, your best bet is to use a gravel washer and take all the dirt off the surface. A lot of the time, if the sand's pretty fine, most of the waste is going to sit right on the top, so you just want to hover over it and get it off there. But a lot of the time, you'll need to crimp the tubing while you do it. So you've got the bell in one hand hovering over the sand. You're crimping the tubing to restrict or control the flow so that you're not sucking sand up, and you just go around the whole tank like that. If you mean before you're actually going to put it in the aquarium, a fine fish net can do a pretty good job. So you can rinse it kind of a handful at a time and dump it in a bucket, or you can do what I do in my laziness and use a hose jammed into the bucket to kind of turn the sand over and just flow water out the top of the bucket, and that will often clean the sand pretty well. You do end up generally losing some of the sand doing that, but it's usually the really, really fine stuff. So yeah.
Cool. Next up, does RO filter water make a tank algae free?
No.
Wah, 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 wah.
No, algae is going to show up in all kinds of ways. You could take a glass of RO water and leave it uncovered to the world, and eventually, if it's sitting in a window, it's going to get algae. Just eventually it will. Here's the thing. Algae, spores and stuff are going to be on all kinds of surfaces in the aquarium. They can even travel with fish. So if you put fish in the tank, even if you have RO water and are using RO water for that aquarium, the fish could bring algae into the tank for you. So it's kind of a losing battle.
How often to clean canister filter on 100-gallon tank?
As often as necessary. I think this is a popular question, how often to clean your filter. My bare minimum for most people is 1 month. You want to clean it at least once a month, and that includes the components like the impeller and seal rings and anything else to make sure that the actual mechanical part of the filter, like the mechanics of the filter that make the water run, are taken care of well and continue to thrive and perform for a very long period of time, so you don't end up buying replacement parts. Most hang-on filters will give you a recommendation of 1 month between cartridge changes. I find hang-on filters really, for the most part, is going to be between 2 weeks and 3 weeks for cartridge changes before they get really bogged up on most tanks. Canister filters can go up to 3 months, but most people will overstock the bejesus out of their aquarium, which is totally fine as long as you're doing enough maintenance. So that usually means your canister filter you're going to want to go into probably monthly or bi-monthly. But if you are modest with your stocking and have a large filter on the tank and all that, you can push it off to 3 months a lot of the time. But you'll find kind of how often you have to do it by going into the filter. So let's say you were lazy and you let it go for 3 months. I've done it. Brian's going to do it, I'm sure.
Inevitably.
And most people will. So you let your filter go for 3 months. When you open it up, if it is absolutely caked with dirt, you waited too long. Long story short, you waited too long. So the next time, try 2 months. If it is, again, just caked, you waited too long again. Go 1 month. And if you find by 1 month the media is saturated, but it's not to the point where it looks like a packed piece of mud in there, then that's probably your good spot to start doing your maintenance schedule.
Spot,
exactly. You just keep going for that 1 month mark. So your tank will tell you how often it needs to be cleaned just through your doing maintenance on the aquarium. So. But yeah, I would say start with 1 month, and if you go into it, and it's better to do it this way. Start with 1 month. If you go in and it's clean, give it more time. Try a month and 2 weeks, go into it again. If it's still relatively clean, the media is not saturated yet, give it some more time. Then the next time, try 2 months. Okay, now we know 2 months is the mark. It's better to work from the front forward for the safety of the aquarium than it is to wait too long and then work backward.
I think my betta has a swim bladder problem. It stays at the top and can't swim down. It still eats and seems to be healthy, but any advice would help. Thank you.
When you say can't swim down, do you mean tries to and fails? Does it have a really bloated looking belly? Does it sit kind of sideways or upside down? Or Does your betta like to just hover at the top and has a bunch of bubbles up there because it probably is protecting a bubble nest that it may have created? Or maybe is it sitting on like a plant leaf, whether it's fake or an ornament, up near the surface? Because there's a big difference. If the betta looks sick and has something going on with its swim bladder, that needs to be addressed. If the betta just prefers to be at the top of the tank, which isn't actually uncommon for bettas, sometimes they'll sit on the bottom, sometimes they'll sit on the top. They'll usually find a comfy spot for themselves and always go back there. So have a little look at what's going on. Really observe your bettas, how they're looking physically. Try to determine if they've got something going on with them. Even send us a picture to our support team. Yes. And they can help you tell if your betta is just happy at the top or if your betta is struggling to swim to the bottom. Yeah.
Next up, Eva asks, I would like to ask which fish Thomas likes the least or wouldn't ever want to keep and why.
That's a good question. What fish would I never want to keep and why? What do I like the least? I know what I love the most. I don't really ever think about what I like the least.
You never just think, you go, I hate that fish.
I hate that. What fish do I hate?
I hate that fish. Like you're at someone else's house, you see in their aquarium, and go, oh, I hate those fish.
Yeah. Oh, man, I'm going to make enemies.
Name names.
Name names. No, I can't. Okay, so here's the thing. I don't really hate any particular fish. What I really detest is keeping fish that do not thrive in captivity. I hate seeing that. Hate it. So one really good example actually that you brought up not long ago in our last live stream was cleaner wrasse. They really don't do well in captivity. So when I see people keeping cleaner wrasses, although I try not to pass judgment on anybody's aquarium hobby and what they do, and I do understand there's a lot of misinformation out there, and stores carry fish that, really at the end of the day aren't great fish to carry. Just because people buy them doesn't make it a good fish to carry. The cleaner wrasse is right there. Not a good fish to keep. Another fish I really don't like. I'm going to try to give more than one example. Oh, I'm going to make enemies here. I personally am not a massive fan of fancy goldfish. Because I know
Someone else said goldfish too.
I know what a normal goldfish is supposed to look like. A wild carp or a, just brown goldfish. That's what they're supposed to look like. So when I see them all like genetically mutated, they're not genetically modified as far as I'm aware. They're genetically mutated. So, you got a messed up looking fish in a batch and went, oh, I like that fish whose spine is all crooked and short. And then you breed it to other fish to make more crooked, short-spined fish. And then that guy happens to have his eyes bulging out of his head. And then you go, I'm not saying that's how they did it, but that's how I'm presuming it probably went down. I'm not the biggest fan of that stuff. I like fish in their natural form most. So I probably won't be keeping fancy goldfish. My only exception to this rule is...
I thought you were going to hit me.
No, I'm going to punch you, Brian. No, my only exception to this rule, I was battling myself, is I guess koi. I love koi. I think koi are gorgeous. Now, the thing is, it's their color and pattern and scale placement that changes, not so much their bodies.
Yeah.
So I can stomach that a lot better, and I actually find koi to be fascinating and gorgeous. And a lot of man-made cichlids I feel the same way about. They're just fascinating and gorgeous. But when you start taking fish with messed up spines and rib cages and whose guts are jammed in their bodies in ways that don't really make sense for them, it kind of is my cutoff point. Not that there's anything wrong with fancy goldfish. I'm not judging anybody who keeps them.
It's a personal preference.
I see... like X-ray vision, what happened to their bodies, and it makes me sad for them.
It's really a curse more than anything. Yeah, you see that and it makes you sad.
I know, it's like a superpower that sucks. A sucker power.
Okay.
But yeah, hopefully everybody still likes me.
No, I see our subscribers.
Our subscribers dropping.
Yeah.
Anybody who likes goldfish just leaves.
Yeah. I only have one extra space at the filter in my peninsula tank. If I want to eventually add coral, would it be better to add a protein skimmer or a mini refugium?
Skimmer. I'm going to say skimmer is probably going to be best. You can always get a hang-on refugium later on, but I think a skimmer is going to pull out waste more consistently than a refugium alone. Although I will say, if you get like a Kato reactor, even do a DIY one, which I've built before, they work incredibly well to remove nutrients if you use a good light. Using a light that's going to work best for Chaetomorpha is going to yield the best results. If they can photosynthesize quickly, you're going to remove waste from the tank very quickly. There's just more maintenance involved because you got to open up a canister essentially, pull out Chaeto in chunks, clean the inside of the canister, throw away the Chaeto that you're not keeping or give it away or whatever, and then lock everything back up. Whereas with a skimmer, you're dumping out a cup once in a while and then doing full maintenance on the skimmer a lot less often than you would, I find, on a Chaeto reactor. I know. I've really trained myself to go with the Chaeto instead of the Chaeto.
All I ever see is Chaeto. I hear that in my head now every time because of you. Chaeto.
Yeah.
I like it better. Sounds cooler.
Whatever people did to me, I've done to you.
Yeah, thanks for that.
You're welcome.
And now I hate goldfish.
Don't hate goldfish. They're interesting.
Goldfish.
Mutants.
Not the cool kind. Well, kind of, I guess it depends. Not the X-Men kind.
No.
That we know of. How do you clean the salt stains in a tank?
They're like the Toad of X-Men.
Yes.
Salt stains?
Salt stains.
Is this an empty tank? Or are you talking about like salt creep that's built up? Usually I'll just get a paper towel with RODI water on it and use that to wipe the salt creep off of things around the aquarium. The reason I use paper towel and RODI water is because I obviously don't want any sort of tap water nasties or anything from a cloth that's touched anything else to get into the tank, especially if it's a reef tank. So yeah, paper towel, RODI water, and just remove it that way. It's probably going to be your safest bet. If you mean limescale buildup, that works best with some sort of acid. I've used citric acid, but I think Hydromagiclean actually works really well for that kind of stuff. The only thing is you can't really use it on a tank that's full because you don't want it getting into the water. So a razor blade is your best bet in that case, a scraper.
Is Marine Pure a good filter media for a marine tank?
Yes. It is an insanely... If you're talking about the Marine Pure biomedia blocks, I've used them for freshwater and for marine, and they have a incredible amount of surface area and flow properties. So water flows through them very quickly, very easily. So you'll get a lot of aerobic bacteria growth inside of a Marine Pure block. So yeah, they work really well. They do work well.
Awesome.
They're just fragile. I will say that. They're fragile. I prefer the 4-inch by 8-inch by 8-inch. I think it's 4 inches thick and then 8 by 8 versus the 1 by 8 by 8 because the 4-inch is less fragile than the 1-inch. I've broken the 1-inch plates on multiple occasions. Not that they work any less well if they're in pieces. Just if you want a plate, you want it to stay a plate.
Cool. This next one, again, it's something that I think you should email into our support team, but we'll see what Thomas's thoughts are. My betta is quite active, not thin, and consistently begging for food, but he seems to have white, stringy poop. Could it still be parasites, even if he seems to be thriving?
Possibly. Poop casings, like fish kind of almost have like a casing that goes over their poop that kind of holds their poop together. You can get sections of that casing that doesn't have a whole lot of poop in it, so you'll have like a little brown spot, some casing, and some more brown in the casing. So if it's like that, I wouldn't worry so much, but if it is just clear or white poop and there's no coloration at all, unless you're feeding him white food, I'd be a little bit worried. Just a bit. But a pic would definitely help. So send a pic of your fish's poop to my friends at the support team because they love pictures of fish poop.
Yeah. Just on even a normal day with a normal poop, just send it.
Just send it and say, is there anything wrong with this poop? They are the poop detectives. I am giving them a new job. They will do visual fecal samples for you. Fish poop only, though.
So email poopdetectives@bigelspets.com. Just kidding. Support at bigelspets.com, and they can, in all seriousness, they can help you out in ways that we may not be able to.
Make the subject Poop Detectives.
Yes, please. That would be wonderful. And we'll make them new name tags for the office. It'll be a whole thing. Do it. Let's all do that together. Should I have separate water bowls for a hermit crab? Maybe he has 2 hermit crabs. He wants to know, like, should you put 2? It's
I don't think so. Just make sure whatever water you do offer for land hermits is shallow, because they are dumb and they will drown. No. I usually recommend a very shallow bowl or dish of water that they can actually get in and out of. This is just me. I don't know what the internet thinks. Yeah, shallow, just so you can get in and out of it. And when I mean shallow, I mean like 1/4 of an inch to maybe 3/8 of an inch of water at most. And then I put a small sponge, like natural sea sponge, in that water as well, because they will also at times just drink off of that. But that will also help with humidity, so when they're molting and stuff, that they can kind of do their thing. So they'll drink, and they'll wade, and they'll molt, and they will smile. I hope.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
How big do bristlenose plecos get?
I would say you're looking at a 4-inch to at absolute maximum 6-inch fish. But I think 4 inches is a pretty good number. I haven't seen too many that get larger than 4 inches. You know, big breeding adults, you might hit the 6 mark. That's it. That's my answer.
Awesome. I never know if you're like planning on elaborating, taking a pause for, dramatic purposes, but
I walk around my mind a lot, so
and I'm not in there with you, so I'm like, what do I do? How often should I feed smaller fish bloodworms, and should they be given alongside or instead of regular food?
I always think that if the fish will eat flake food or pelleted food, having a staple flake food or staple pellet food, tropical or whatever they are, if it's goldfish, then staple goldfish food, having that as a base is great, and then you add on top of it. Not saying you can't feed, bloodworms consistently or anything else, but a lot of those diets are really well-rounded for fish. To kind of, and obviously from a good brand, you don't want to go buy the cheapest staple food you can and just be like, haha, good enough. You can do that, but you want to get something that's a really well-rounded food and then add on top of that. So I would do that and then add bloodworms on top if the fish will eat other foods. Otherwise, if all they're eating right now is bloodworms, stick with that and then try mixing a feeding session with some bloodworms and some flake food, or some bloodworms and some pellets, to try to transition them over to something prepared that'll be easier for you to feed, as well as add more nutritional benefits than just what bloodworms have. Because fish usually don't eat just one specific thing. They'll eat a variety of foods in the wild that will add up to their total intake of minerals and vitamins and everything else, so that they have a good diet that they've been basically evolved to have. So yeah. Cool. Mix it up. Mix it up is better if you can get them to do it.
Cool. We are pretty much at time. Do you want to do a lightning round for a couple minutes?
Yeah, let's do a few more.
All right, before we hit the lightning round, I do want to say, guys, hit that like button again. If whoever hasn't, hit that like button. It definitely helps us. What I want you guys to know is that for my contribution every week isn't much, just helping him answer questions, like giving him the question he answers. But I do want to extend this opportunity to you guys. Email me. If you guys have cool fish facts that maybe are obscure, people don't know, I would love you to email me and I can read up on it and bring it up during the live Q&As and give you guys credit for, if you give me an idea I decide to talk about. I think it'd be really, really cool if you guys could send me some ideas. So I'm going to put my email address in chat, and you guys can let me know any cool facts you got, and we'll discuss those too during our future Q&As. What do you think?
It's important because I can't give Brian these facts. They're supposed to be a surprise for me, and then we have a discourse about it.
That's right. I told him what one of my ideas was, and like we're walking down the stairs into the studio, and I'm like, I have 2 ideas, and he mentions like, is one this? And I'm like, how did you even know that? He got it right out of the air, and
he gave me it was such a shy little tidbit.
Yeah.
He literally, I think, said, this fish does something cool.
Does something cool. He's like, is it this fish? And just took the wind out of my sails. So anyway, email me your ideas for really cool fish facts that maybe he doesn't know, or even if he does. I love to learn new things. So email me those. I'll put my email in the chat, and we'll chat about it maybe next week. With that said, let's do lightning round real quick.
Yay.
As fast as we can anyway.
Sure.
I've read that in dosing there should be more potassium and phosphates than nitrogen when dosing. But if you raise the PO4, that will also raise the K. Any ideas on this?
I'm going to be honest. I don't have any immediate ideas on this. Here's a really cool admission of mine. I've never had to drill down that far into keeping plants because I have not had the experience of having plants go south on me. I've always basically used a general fertilizer, CO2, and adequate lighting, and had good results. But to that effect, it's because I think I basically use plants that are low demand plants, like relatively easy to keep even for plants that require CO2. So I haven't really had to drill into it. But what I will say is I'm going to be trying some much more difficult plants than I ever have when I do the high-tech plant tank series, and I am going to have to drill into micro and macronutrients and test for both, which is going to be nuts. This is why we started with the low-tech tank, because it's something I knew I could do very easily and give you guys a lot of information on, and kind of warm me back up into getting into plants, because I haven't done planted tanks for quite a while. I think my last aquatic planted tank was probably in 2010 or 2011. So a few years ago. So yeah, but no, we'll get into that kind of stuff when we get to the high-tech planted tank series. And I'll help you answer that. Reach out to our support team. This is something we can easily do some research on and get you a straight answer. But reach out to support, and let's get you that answer now before the high-tech series starts.
Yeah. What types of plants can you recommend for a cichlid tank? I have 4 red tigers in a 75-gallon.
Are they Africans, red tigers? Red tiger cichlids.
Anyone mentioned it might be faster to just get it in the chat.
Anyways, cichlids have a tendency to really beat on plants and dig and rip things out. The only plants that I've seen that do South American. I would say stick with Anubias and Java fern or Java moss attached to driftwood and rocks. They're going to dig up the substrate, and it's going to be a waste of time if you plant a bunch of plants down there and they just rip them out on you. So driftwood, Anubias, Java fern, Java moss.
I know you mentioned that you can trim live plants, but how much should you trim them back by?
If they have a good root system, most plants you can trim real far down. But it depends. Like, for instance, Anubias, if they're getting big and wily, you don't take leaves off. You cut the rhizome, which is where all the leaves attach. Just trim the rhizome back, and you can take that, and it becomes another Anubias plant, and you can go plant it somewhere else. Stem plants, depending on how leggy they get underneath, what a lot of people will actually do is either trim them right down almost to the roots, like at the base where they're in the substrate, or dig them out, cut them down, and then take the tops that are full of leaves, which will also have some roots straying out underneath because they tend to get roots all the way up the stem as the leaves die off, and replant those back down into the substrate. So it really depends. Baby tears, you trim down until it's the height of the carpet you want. Hairgrass, same idea. You can basically trim it down until it's the height you want. So depending on the plant dictates how you're going to trim it. But long story short is you can trim a plant as much as you need to, just as long as you're trimming a plant in a way that's appropriate to that plant.
Cool. Can ammonia spike throughout the day and turn low in the evening when you test the water? Or should you still measure it?
Spike during the day and go low in the evening. It shouldn't. If your ammonia is relatively high, it's going to stay high, relatively high, whether or not it's night or day. When you test the water, you're going to read ammonia in a fairly significant amount. So even if it does fluctuate, it should be very little. Some things will fluctuate, with the lights being on or off, like your pH. If you have live plants, your pH can swing heavily during the day or night. Same with corals. depending on the amount of respiration that's happening in the aquarium. So when photosynthesis stops, you can have a dive in pH as CO2 creeps up. And then when the lights come back on, your pH will swing back up as photosynthesis commences again, which is interesting.
Good? Or are you walking around in your head?
No, I'm done.
Okay, awesome. Is it okay to keep one male molly and one male platy in a 20-gallon, or will they get aggressive with no females?
One male molly, one male platy in a 20-gallon. I would throw a third male in there and you'd probably be okay. Male swordtail. Just like as long as there's other fish in there, they should leave each other alone. But otherwise, 3 is better than 2. 2, you're always gonna have a dominant and a subdominant or getting his butt kicked fish. So having 3 males will disperse that aggression a bit more.
Let me see something new. There's a lot of comments. Will clownfish host in elegance corals?
I believe I've seen them do it. They'll host euphyllias, and elegance are going to be similar. And I feel like I have seen a clownfish in an elegance. I can't remember what species of clown it would have been, but my gut says yes. My gut says yes. I can't be 100%. But some good alternatives, leather corals like umbrella leathers, toadstool leathers with long tentacles, euphyllia corals, and hairy mushrooms. All excellent substitutes for clownfish.
Excellent. What's the difference between internal and external filter?
An internal filter will be inside of the aquarium. The whole body and mechanism of the filter and all the media will sit in the tank. You'll have a power cord running out. An external filter will be the exact opposite. It will be outside of the aquarium. So a submersible internal filter is a good example of an internal filter, or a corner filter, a box filter. Versus an external filter would be something like a hang-on filter or a canister filter.
Pretty much it.
Sump filter is external.
I have a new tank which has had fish, 6 small minnows, in it for about 2 weeks. When should I change the filter foams? Water tests are all okay.
If they're visually dirty, you can rinse them out. Just make sure you're rinsing them out in water from the aquarium. So take a small amount of the water from the tank in a bucket, squeeze them out in that, and you can put them back in. If they don't look dirty, you don't have to do that yet. But if they're starting to gum up, the more often you do it, the cleaner you keep them, the better it is. The less chance you're going to have nutrient buildup. Like there's no harm in cleaning it more often, as long as you're doing it in a way that will not kill the beneficial bacteria, which is why you want to use water from the aquarium when you're rinsing them.
Okay, we'll do a few more. 3 more?
Yeah.
All right. Lighting affects nitrates?
Lighting affects nitrates. Maybe lighting will affect nitrates if you have high lighting in algae or high lighting and plants. Then the amount of nitrate that is uptake by those things would be will increase. So you'll have reduced nitrates. I don't think I've heard of lighting affecting the amount of nitrate you have in your water. Like I said, I've heard of pH being fluctuated by lighting because of biological processes in the tank changing whether or not lights are on, but like through photosynthesis. Haven't heard of nitrates. Not to say that that doesn't exist, just I haven't come across it.
You think you would have by now, huh? Should you not have by now if it was a thing?
Here's the thing. The hobby is always ever evolving. People are making discoveries on how things are actually operating in an aquarium, or just in general as science changes and our understanding of chemical reactions and biological processes and all these things evolve. And as we have more tools to measure things and observe things, and our understanding grows, we have to basically learn new stuff because we have new things to apply to our hobby or new things to apply to our everyday life. So yeah, it's possible that I've never come across it because just up until now I haven't needed to, and the technology when I may have needed to in the past wasn't there, and now it is. I don't know.
Fair enough. Is it normal for a cory to swallow and blow bubbles at the surface of the tank? It's the only fish that does it, so I think it's an issue unique to that fish rather than a tank problem.
A lot of catfish will swallow atmospheric air to utilize in their bellies, basically for oxygen intake. Some fish will also swallow air for buoyancy purposes, but I would be willing to bet, since cories are catfish, that they're probably swallowing the air just to hold on to it for breathy purposes. That would be my guess.
Cool. Last one. I believe this is 3. What's a good CO2 reactor for a nano looking at Mr. Aqua 200? Your thoughts?
Never used the Mr. Aqua 200. I have, however, used a few different models of the ISTA CO2 kind of all-in-one kits. They've all been pressurized. I prefer pressurized units. They're a lot more consistent. They're a lot easier to work with because of that. And they're not terribly expensive. But I would look into the ISTA kits. You would need probably a low flow or reduced flow regulator for a nano tank. So there is a reduced flow regulator kit that I believe we carry. That includes a refillable pressurized CO2 bottle, probably in the 1 liter range, maybe 2 liter, and a regulator and a diffuser and all that good stuff. But probably has a drop checker too. The only thing you might want to add, or if you don't want to bump up to one of the bigger kits, is a solenoid for shutting the CO2 off at night and a timer.
All right. Well, I guess that about wraps it up. We're about 10 minutes past. So
Nice.
Thank you guys, as always, so much for coming out. We couldn't get to all the questions as we usually can't, which we regret. That is regrettable, but it is the nature of this. So many of you guys coming out. We really appreciate that support. Thank you for coming out.
Always.
I enjoy having you.
I like doing this.
Yeah.
Gives us a chance to hang out. Gives us a chance to hang out with you guys. Keeps me sharp. I'll tell you, some days, being a father to 2 young children, I am not 100%, running on very little sleep, and that's probably why I run around in my brain so much.
I was up at 4 a.m. today for no reason. Just, my kid just didn't want to sleep, and it was just, okay, time to wake up, I guess. So I feel you.
We went to bed and then woke up, and then went to bed and then woke up.
Yeah.
It was an interesting night.
Yeah. You sleep in waves.
So if I seem a little... It's because I'm running off less sleep than usual. But
You done good, kid.
we honestly, I love this.
Yeah. And we have another one coming up every Wednesday. Remember, every
Yes.
Wednesday at 1 p.m. EST, we're going to be hosting these. Same bat time, same bat channel. The next one is actually on Halloween. We should dress up and wear costumes What do you think? I'm going to wear a costume.
I will. I don't even know if I own a costume. I'll figure something out.
I already have a good idea for what I'm going to be. Oh, yes, I know exactly.
Yep.
It'll be a fun one. So make sure to join us on Halloween, the 30th. I believe it's a Wednesday. I hope so. I'm going to dress up regardless now. Make sure you join us on the 31st at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thomas will be back to answer your questions. I'll be back to give you whatever fun fact I've got for the last week, and then do nothing else really from my part. Again, thank you guys so much. Make sure you tell your friends about us. If you're not subscribed, do it. If you know friends that aren't subscribed, tell them to subscribe. Share this on social, share it on Reddit, share it everywhere, because the bigger we get, the better things will get.
Yeah. The more we're going to be able to do, the more grand any of our projects will be. And we really, I especially, but Brian for sure too, really want to bring you guys like the best content we possibly can.
Yeah.
So yeah, the more you guys support us, the more we can do for you. Which
maybe we can get a webcam that doesn't autofocus in and out all the time.
What are you talking about, Brian? I didn't notice that at all.
I've seen people mention it. I had to apologize to someone 5 minutes ago for it. I'd like to get a proper setup. So again, the more popular we become, the better things we'll get. So share us around. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
With all that said, I guess we're pretty much ready to go. You watch The Daily Show, right?
I do.
I don't know if they do it anymore. I only used to watch it during the Jon Stewart days. They used to have a moment of Zen, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to play a moment of Zen right now.
Okay.
All right. With all that said, thank you so much, guys. And as always,
keep on tanking.